that you've downloaded and installed Android Studio, we will go ahead and build our first working Android application. So if you go ahead and launch Android Studio, you should see the welcome screen. If you have previously used Android Studio and had any projects opened, you would see a list of your recent projects on the left side of the welcome screen here. I will go ahead and close this so that if this is the first time you're running Android Studio, you'll see no projects listed and you'll just see the welcome screen like this. Go ahead and click on Start a New Android Studio Project, and we get this wizard which will walk us through creating our first project. So the first thing we need is an application name. So I will change this to Hello Android. And the name of your application goes here under application name. The next thing we need is our company domain. So this is used throughout the setup and structure for your project. Basically, whatever your company name is, .com or .org, and so on. So in my case, my company name is Anara, so I have the name of the company and .com. So this is my domain. And then we need our project location. So you can click on these three dots, the ellipsis on the right side here, and it will let you choose the directory where to store your project. One caveat to note here is you should not have any spaces in the path for your project. So notice that all of these folders have no spaces in their names. And if you did need a space or something that looks like a space, you can use an underscore. But if you use spaces, that can mess up things for you, so try to avoid that. So I will click on these ellipses, and I have already set up a folder where I keep all my test projects for Android, and I will just create a new folder there and call it Hello Android, and click on Create and then Open, and you'll see that path is now available as the project location. Then Android Studio assigns a default package name for you, which consists of your domain, in my case com.anara, followed by the application name. So com.anara.helloandroid. If you wanted to change this for some reason, you could click on Edit and change that. I would just leave the default. We do not need C++ support, so that is unchecked. If you see Include Kotlin support, make sure it's checked. If you don't see it, that's fine. If somebody's using Android Studio 3 or later, it now includes Kotlin support by default, so you may not even see this checkbox. I've been using Android Studio for my older version that's been updated, so that's why I still see this checkbox, but if you have a fresh install, you won't even see this checkbox anymore. You click on Next. Now we need to decide which platform are we targeting. So for this demo, we will just choose phone and tablet. The other options are Android wearables, such as watches and so on, Android TV, Android Auto for automobiles, and Android Things. For the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to use the very latest version of Android operating system, API 27. However, in production, when you're making a real app, you need to realize that the older version you use, the more of a population will be able to use your app, and the newer version you choose, the more current features of Android you can leverage. However, you'll have a smaller percentage of people who can actually use your app. To see what the distribution is of this, you can click on Help Me Choose here, and it will show you the current distribution of the Android operating systems. So you see the vast majority of people are somewhere between 4.1 and 5.1. This is the complete opposite of, for example, iOS, where the vast majority of people are on the most recent version of the operating system, and a small percentage are on a one-year-old version of the operating system, and almost nobody is on anything older than a year. However, on Android, you have the flip situation, where the vast majority of people are on an operating system that's about 4 years old. And then very small percentage, in this case 1.5%, are on the current operating system. Actually, the current version is 8, so very small percentage are even on 7.1. and the vast majority of people are between 4 and 5. So I will hit cancel on this, and now again for the demo I'm just going to choose the latest version, and then I will click on next, and then we need to choose what type of activity do we want to add. So you could use no activity, or they have a bunch of templates for different types of apps that you might want to build. For this demo we're just going to choose an empty activity, click on next, and then we need to give the activity and the layout a name. So I will leave the defaults, which is main activity and activity main. That's just perfectly fine. You can always leave the defaults there, but if for some reason you wanted to have a different name for your activity, you could change that, and if you want to have a different name for your main layout file, you could change that here. Make sure that generate layout file is checked so that it will create that file for you. And we do not need backwards compatibility, so we will uncheck that box. And just so you understand, an Android app consists of a bunch of activities. Activities are what are viewable to the user. So basically the screens of your application are known as activities. So I will go ahead and click on finish. And at that point, Android Studio starts building our project. So you notice here, Gradle is listed here. Gradle is the build system that is used to generate and build our application. So once that finishes, we see this view here with some code in the main screen. I'm just going to go ahead and close all this. And you see on the left side, I have an app folder and I have something called Gradle scripts. And if you don't see this, then you can click on this project tab here on the left side and it will open that. There's some other tabs also, but what you want is the project tab. And under Gradle scripts, we have the Gradle files that basically configure how our project is built. We'll look at that later. And under app, you'll see we have manifests, Java, and res, R-E-S, which stands for resource. So the first thing we'll talk about is this res folder. So under res folder, if we open that up, we'll see there's drawable, layout, mipmap, and values. So under values, we have a bunch of XML files that hold all the default colors for our app, all of the localized strings for our app, and all of the styles for our app. So if you go ahead and open up strings.xml, you'll see one string is defined by default here, which is the app name. So instead of hard coding strings to our application, the best practice is to have them localized in a strings.xml file. So you could support multiple languages, and you would have a different strings file for each language, and you would have the translation for whatever the string is as a value in each tag. Under mipmap, you'll find all of the graphics resources for the application that are non-vector. Under mipmap, you'll find all of the graphic assets that are raster graphics as opposed to vector graphics. So you'll see here's a launcher image. So if I open that up, you can see there's a icon for the app that's provided for you by default. You could replace that. But again, these are raster graphics. And then under layout, you'll see we have the files that define the layout for apps. If I go ahead and open the one file that's there, it's called activity_main.xml. All the layout files are defined either in XML or by you in code, but the default is that they're defined as XML. And you can see the design view shows you how the actual app screen looks. If I click on this text tab at the bottom here, it will show me the code for that. And again, it's all XML. It's very simple and easy to read. So you can see that it's created this default layout for us. It has a text view here that's populated with this text hello world. If I go to the text view to see the code, I can see here is a text view. And here is the text that we see that appears in there. So we can go ahead and change that if we want to welcome to my first Android app. and I will go back to design view, and I will see that the text has changed to reflect that. And then we have one more folder here under res called drawable, and that is where all the vector assets for our app live. Currently provides by default background and foreground file. So if I open one of those, you can see a bunch of paths. So again, this is vector. So vector are graphics that are defined by code, by XML, as opposed to raster graphics that are basically pixels defined as such. So the difference between raster and vector graphics is vector graphics scale without any pixelation because they're defined by code programmatically, and raster graphics do not scale. If you scale them, they will pixelate. So if I close up the res, I see there are two other folders here, manifests and Java. Now Java is a bit of a misnomer because it's called Java because originally the only programming language for doing Android development was Java, so that's why it's called Java. However, even if you're using Kotlin as your programming language, which is the new default, it's still called Java. And under there we see three different directories. Two of them are for tests, so this one is for, like this has an instrument test, and this one has unit tests in it. And then the first one is where our actual code lives, and you can make more directories underneath Java if you want and store your code as such. So if you look at here, we have the package name again and the app name, and then we have the single class which is called main activity. If I double click that to open it, I can see I have a Kotlin class, and it's the only class. Now, the first folder here we have is called manifest, and that is where your manifest XML file lives. If I double click that, I can see the code for that. And basically the manifest is the first thing that Android will look at to decide and determine what is it about your app that it needs to do. Like what is the first screen it needs to launch? What is the first class that it's going to look at? So you have manifest tag at the root, and then you have an application tag, and then you have one or more activities defined within the application. And in this demo, we only have one activity. Out of those activities, one of those will be defined as the first activity that will be launched by Android. So you see here we have an action defined in the category, and the category is launcher. So this is the one that is the first screen to be launched. So if I command click on Mac or control click on the name of the activity, which is here, main activity, then it will take me into that file, which again is defined under Java here. So this is that same file. This is a simple Kotlin class. It has a single function, which is the single function you have to override in an activity. And so it's the built-in function on create. Since it's built in, we have to override it. And the first thing we do is we call the super, which is the parent function. And then we have set content view r.layout.activity main. And basically here it's setting what is the layout file that's going to be associated with this activity. So set content view r.layout.activity main. And if I command click or control click on this, it will actually jump into the layout file. So you see the association. So the manifest file defines what is the main activity, and the main activity will set what is the layout file. So let's go ahead and run this. In order to run this app, we will click on this green play button or press Ctrl R, and it will ask us to choose a deployment target. So we need to choose an emulator image or a physical hardware device. So I happen to have a physical Android device connected, so that shows up in this list. And I also have two emulators defined. If this is the first time you're ever running Android Studio and you don't have physical hardware connected to your computer, then this list will be empty. So you would need to create a new virtual device. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll click on Create New Virtual Device. And I'm going to choose a phone. And I'm going to choose a Pixel. I'll click on Pixel XL, and I'll hit Next. And then I need to choose what operating system would be defined on that device. So since my app is only targeting API 27, I'll just leave it at API 27, and I'll click on Next. And then you can give it a name. I already have 2 of these defined, so it's putting in number 3 at the end, which is fine. I'll just leave the default name, and I leave the default for everything else, and I'll click on Finish, and it's now added this to my list of emulators. I'll hit OK, and now at the bottom some processes are running, and basically it's launching the Android emulator, which is here. And the first time you run a new emulator, it takes some time for the Android operating system to load up on the device. Subsequent times that you run the emulator, it should not take as long. And once it launches the operating system, then it will go ahead and launch the app for you. And there you have it. So you see the name of the application is in the upper left-hand corner, and the single text view that we have in our app shows up here. If I want to go and make a change, I can just go back to Android Studio, and let me just go ahead and edit this text again and say, welcome back. And then I can go ahead and click on play again, or Control R. And you'll see again, it's going to relaunch the app. And you see the changes have taken effect. And there you go, you now have built your first Android application.